Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. Now, since we are right off of the patch, Leader has had the Nakia treatment where it is just gutted, it is so much harder to play, and we have this featured location, Plunder Castle. In Plunder Castle, only cards that cost 6 can be played here. So the wording is very important. With the way that card cost locations work, if the card has been reduced or increased in cost for whatever reason, and it's over or under 6, even if its base was 6, it can no longer be played there. So even a 0 cost card, where it can circumvent a lot of these locational restrictions, it is not going to be able to be played into Plunder Castle. So this should create some really interesting dynamics, some interesting play. Today we're going to be covering my top decks and techs to play while this location is featured, and again, it's only going to appear in 40% of games, so it will occur quite often, but not often enough that you want to specifically have a deck that can't navigate without this location. So starting off, we have a couple of cards that are going to be really good with this location. First up is Dr. Doom. Any kind of card that can go wide and spread power into multiple lanes is going to be rather good for Plunder Castle, because you never know if your opponent is going to drop a wave on turn 4 and then all of a sudden nobody can play a card into Plunder Castle. You want to make sure that you can get some power over there somehow, and I think Dr. Doom is going to be a lifesaver today. And along the same lines, we have Arnim Zola. Arnim Zola is going to allow us to play some really big, powerful plays in one lane and then push them into others. Wave. Wave is going to be a sneaky choice here. I think Wave is going to be really phenomenal in restricting your opponent from being able to play into that location on turn 6. So if you can find kind of cheeky or sneaky ways to play this card, I think it's going to be very easy to sneak that location away whenever your opponent's game plan is ruined. Vision has the same benefit as a Dr. Doom, in that Vision is going to be able to be played early, and then you can move that power over into Plunder Castle so you can get power there without actually playing a card. And I think that is going to be incredibly important today. Same thing with Captain Marvel, just a little bit lesser so, because 2 Captain Marvels create some strife between each other, so if both players are running Captain Marvel, a Vision is going to be a little bit more powerful, but you do have to have the foresight to be able to play it correctly, whereas Captain Marvel has that buffer where she can maneuver herself to find the winning lane. Arrow. If you are playing a straight-up game and the opponent is going to try to play their 6-cost card into Plunder Castle on turn 6, you can yank that card out, so if you have something like a Mr. Fantastic, something like a Claw, and you have some power in that location already, Arrow can save you that location, and then all of a sudden you win because you yank their card into a lane that they don't necessarily want it to be in. Ultron, he goes wide. He sends power across the board. He's going to be great in like Patriot builds, and I think those will be pretty decent today, but you will have to run the risk of stacking all of your cards into those 2 remaining lanes, which if you get hit with junk decks, debris, titanias, could be kind of troublesome, but I think overall he will be a very good choice today. Similar to the cards that can go wide, this card, Claw, can push power to the side. He's going to be able to be great as long as Plunder Castle is not the first location that pops up. He's going to be great at pushing power into those harder to reach locations. And then lastly, we have Mr. Fantastic. And I know that you could put just about any 6-cost card here and say it's a good tech card. Like a Heimdall is going to be decent to shift cards over. Those are all going to be just fine. I don't think there's going to be an issue with them. These give you some particular advantage. And so Mr. Fantastic is going to be able to be used to push power wide over into Plunder Castle. And then if you can restrict the opponent from being able to play there, you get a lot of value and you can easily sneak away games that would be otherwise unwinnable. All right, so covering my top decks. First up, we have a Lockjaw rotation build. And this one does run Thor and Jane Foster, but with the limited space, maybe this package isn't good today. Maybe you add in Magneto over Hulk so that you can clump the opponent's cards together. But a lot of times you can accidentally pull too much value or power over into your lane, and then you might accidentally push yourself into a losing position as a result. But you can remove the Thor and Jane Foster. You can run some other good cards. You can add in Magneto, some other big power plays. But I do like the multiple play lines between the Thor, the Lockjaw, and Jane Foster. It just gives you additional rotation tools and overall provides a lot of value. And then this runs a lot of the good tech cards that we have today. So it runs Arrow to restrict the opponent from playing in that location. Vision to be able to manually move that power over to that location. You have your Dr. Doom. a lot of ways to push power into that lane, or you can just drop one of your 6-cost cards over there naturally in a Hulk, Magneto, potentially a Giganto, but probably not. You'd have to skip turn 5, which would be a pretty big undertaking. And then next we have an ongoing Destroyer style build. Now this is very close to the Orka build that I ran whenever the card first released, and overall it felt pretty decent. It's a little bit clunky, it's a little bit higher end, but if you're seeing that location frequently, you're going to be able to get power over into that lane early. You can drop your Orka, your Destroyer, before pivoting and leaning in on how to push power the rest of the way. So you could do a Professor X on 4 to really limit the opponent in the spaces that they can play. You can then do your Orka, your Destroyer, and on the last turn you can follow up and finalize that game with your Spectrum. I think Orka is going to be a really good card for this featured location. If he is the only card there, your only card there, then he's going to be 14 power, which is pretty big. That is one of the better 6-cost cards, and you're most likely not going to have any other resources there, so this kind of feeds into his strengths. And then if you ramp up and drop him on 5, Spectrum can buff him up just a little bit further to be able to outpower any kind of Destroyer plays that you might be seeing. And then next we have a Daredevil Electro ramp. Now this one doesn't run Professor X. You could run it in place of Nick Fury, but in this version I've opted to go with just good value, good power, and yes, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. There is leader in this list. I don't know that he's going to be the best in slot. You may be better off putting another 5-cost card in so that you always have a good target for your turn 4 play or turn 5 play once you hit Electro. But I think he's going to be a surprise factor. If Plunder Castle is to the far right, then you might be able to sneak him into mid, push some good power mid, and then copy whatever the opponent plays into the right lane. Now, this particular build has a playline that I'm really excited about. I think it's going to be really cheesy. I think it's going to be really cheap and really fun to play in a wave on 3 into an Arnim Zola on 4, which will push wave to the other 2 lanes. It will re-trigger wave's ability. And then on 5, you can follow that up by playing Odin onto the Arnim Zola, which will of course re-trigger and move Odin into the other 2 lanes, where he will re-trigger the wave once again. And so your opponent is only going to be able to play 1 card per turn on turns 4, 5, and 6, which if they're running a deck that wants to flood stuff on the board, is going to be impossible to overcome. If they do get Zabu onto the board, they might be able to push some decent power, but they are going to be restricted to their 4-cost cards. And if they are running something where they want to play a big 6-cost card into the Plunder Castle, Wave is going to make sure that they can't do that, and you've already pushed some power into that location by playing your Arnim Zola to push your Odin over into that lane, so you have 11 power over there already, and you've restricted your opponent. And then if you don't get that play line, we do have the Doctor Doom into an Odin, we have Magneto to pull their cards around the board, we have a Leader to try to sneak some power out onto the board, and we have Arrow to yank their cards to where we want them to be. I think this one is going to be really fun to play. This is the one that I'm going to be testing out first. I think it has some pretty cool potential for being an off-meta build that might not be too far off-meta. And then next we have a Shuri deck. And in this list, I've taken out any kind of Sauron, any kind of Series 5 cards that are a little bit harder to access. Now that Shuri has come down to Series 4, she should be a lot more accessible, and she is one of the better cards right now. Now, this particular list does run a couple of things that make it susceptible to counterplays. It could get Shang-Chi'd, you might be able to outmaneuver them with an Arnim Zola, it might be able to get Cosmo'd. But I think overall, in most games, it is going to be pretty decent. You're going to be able to double down on your Red Skull, double down on your Black Panther into an Arnim Zola to be able to send it into those other lanes so that it's a 32 power push in both of those lanes. You could use your Shuri on 4, skip on 5 into a She-Hulk and a Taskmaster. Of course, neither one will be able to be played into Plunder Castle. But if you maneuver your Sunspot or your Armor or your Zero just right, you might be able to push power into Plunder Castle before it reveals, and then you don't have to worry about trying to fit that 6-cost card in there, even if you don't get your Arnim Zola play. But overall, I think Shuri's going to be a great choice, especially since it likes to lean into the Arnim Zola piece. Once it gets moved over, that's not going to be able to be hit with a Shang-Chi. So if you armor in one lane, the other one is Plunder Castle, and you have initiative to use your Arnim Zola before they could counterplay, you can maneuver it where there's no chance that you get countered, there's no chance that your card gets destroyed, and you just put yourself in a very good position to win. And then lastly, we have a Patriot build. Now, this one I think is going to be the weaker of the choices because you'll have to rely on Ultron pushing those bots over into that location. And yes, if you do have your high roll, your Patriot, and your Mystique already on the board, maybe your Patriot, Mystique, and Blue Marvel, then Ultron can very easily win that game just with the drones alone. But having such a restricted space to play in does make navigating a Patriot deck a little bit more difficult. But if this is an archetype that you like, I think it's going to be just fine today. You are going to be able to try to push power over into that location early, whether it be a Squirrel Girl, whether it be your Mr. Sinister, your Misty Knight. By playing over there early, you might be able to avoid that restriction with Ultron, and then maybe you drop Ultron over into the Plunder Castle in the last turn, and then push those drones into the other 2 lanes. Overall, I think Patriot is a very consistent list, and I think today is going to be no different. But those are my top decks and techs to try out while this location is featured. What cards, combos, or lists are you guys seeing? Do you think are going to be good? Was there anything on my list that you didn't necessarily agree with? If so, let me know in the comment section down below so that I can continue to further improve my building and brewing process. But as always, this has been TLSG. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Later, guys.